Hi, this is Outlaw Bookseller, Stephen E. Andrews, and it's time for the Hay-On-Wye science fiction book haul, as promised. I'm going to start with a few things which I didn't get on Hay-On-Wye, which I've either acquired recently or been reading. So we'll just have a quick look at those first. And first of all here, moving left to right, as you read, of course, in the English language, we have Keith Laumer's Dinosaur Beach, which I was reading a while ago, and I did mention it. And I finished that very quickly, and it's a door book. I got that online, very, very cheap, and it was really great fun, and I really enjoyed it. Time travel, and written in a very sort of sharp, hard-boiled style, which I really liked. So I haven't neglected Keith Laumer, so I will be reading more. So that's something I polished off recently. Also, I received in the mail recently from the author himself, Ian Hugh McAllister. Hello, Ian. We talked a bit online. This is his book, which is called To Visit Earth, and it is published by, and there's no collar on the spine, by Cloaked Press, which is a small press in the south of England, who are sort of trying to do some SF with a kind of vintage feel to it. Good for them. I've not actually read that yet, but Ian sent me that, so thanks for that, Ian. And then something I acquired recently, which I've kind of coveted for a while, I guess, in hardcover, is Richard Cowper's Profundis, which I've had for a very long time in a pan paperback. It's quite an uncommon book, this, in this condition, and that's a signed first. Richard Cowper is gone, sadly. Really good book about a submarine, amongst other things. I won't tell you any more than that. Here's something I acquired on eBay for a mere $7.99. And this is Poul Anderson's Conflict, as you can see, published by Seven House. Anybody watches this channel knows that I'm currently on a bit of a Poul Anderson kick. I'm collecting a lot of Poul's works because I do feel I've neglected his SF, even though I've admired his fantasy for quite a long time. And if you look on the internet, places like AB, you'll see there are two copies of this on sale. There's one on sale about 28 quid, and it's an absolute wreck. And there's one on for £80, and I got this for $7.99, and it's absolutely beautiful. And unusually for Seven House, it's got pictorial on the rear as well as on the front. Absolutely lovely. So I was really, really pleased with that. So it just shows if you shop around, ask the right questions, be diligent in your searching, you will occasionally get something very special, very cheap. So I was really, really pleased with that. So moving on now to the Hay-On-Wye haul. And I didn't really look for hardcovers while I was in Hay. I thought I wanted to pick up a load of paperbacks, which I probably should have had in the collection a long time ago. But I did buy one hardcover, and that was this, A Noose of Light by Seamus Cullen, published by MacDonald in the late 80s. This was an A format fantasy novel, and I used to sell it in the bookshop I worked at the time. And I've never read it. It's the first of two, I believe, that he did, a little diptych. And it's a kind of new Arabian Nights type adventure. It's a lovely book. It was really, really dirty. As you can see, the text blot there is sort of quite in a state, but I've taken the toothbrush to it and I've popped it in a bag. And I really sort of wanted it for nostalgia more than anything else. And this was £3. Now, this is an uncommon book in any format. You don't see it very often. And I am trying to sort of get together some of the books I used to sell, you know, so I can gaze on them in my old age and remember those halcyon days, as it were. I mean, some people don't like nostalgia. I don't really care what people think. I think nostalgia is a great feeling. You know, sometimes you can look back with rose-tinted glasses. Sometimes a lot of things are more enjoyable than you realised at the time, and you know, and they give you a warm glow. So that's good. So £3, I was really pleased with that. So there's some hardcovers there. I'll probably leave those there as a backdrop while I look through the paperbacks that I got. And I got several tranches of things. I thought I'll take you through the singletons first, the sort of one-offs. And one of my favourite science fiction writers is Robert Silverberg, and that's Stepsons of Terror, which is not that uncommon. That's an early book. That's probably around about his 6th novel. And this one is published by Sphere. I got quite a lot of Sphere, actually. Sphere is defunct imprint these days, which is a shame. And Unbroken Spine. Nearly all of these that I'm going to show you, they cost me £2, £2.50 in that ballpark. And I got most of them from Adiman Books, from the Cinema Bookshop, and Richard Booth's. I don't think I bought anything anywhere else. I think it was those three outlets. got me pretty much everything. So I wouldn't say I'm a Silverberg complete. This is a very, very big oeuvre. I tend to favour the period which is the most critically acclaimed, which is from the late 60s, probably starting with something like Man in the Maze. People say Thorns is his first major book. I disagree. I think it was Man in the Maze, and that goes up to about Shadrach in the Furnace, and then he quit for a few years before writing the best-selling Lord Valentine's Castle. So that period, late 60s, early 70s, is really, really key. They're all fantastic books. But, you know, some of the early ones are worth having. The later ones I'm less familiar with. I do intend to start picking those up, but they do look more routine. The ones I've read definitely felt more routine. So that was one of the first Silverbergs I saw. He is becoming more collectible, so there's a little tip for you. So if you see some Bob you haven't seen before, pick him up. And somebody else who I feel I've neglected over the years is Gordon R. Dixon. And this is Necromancer, again in Sphere, I believe. Let's take a quick look. Yeah, that's a Sphere. And this was someone I used to sell in this livery. And it's a kind of precursor to the Dorsey series, as I understand it. He had this huge cycle that he never finished, which was going to contain mainstream novels as well. I think it was called the Child Cycle. And he's somebody I kind of never really sort of delved into, but I really love that cover. It's a bit like the cover for The Unreasoning Mask by Philip Jose Farmer, which is one of Farmer's most interesting and acclaimed books. So it's a similar sort of ballpark cover to that. So that was quite nice. Another one-off I bought that day is by an old favourite of mine, Norman Spinrad, an author I really, really like. Though having said that, I probably do need to buy a lot more of his books. I've read all the classic famous ones, Bug Jack Barron, The Iron Dream, Void Captain's Tale, early things like Men in the Jungle, lots of the short stories. Norman's a really great hardcore new wave science fiction writer of attitude, and I've not actually read this one, so that'll be great because I haven't actually read anything new by him for many years, so I'm quite looking forward to that. It's nice to have a Spinrad I haven't read to read, and there are a few others I need to pick up, but they're quite hard to find in good nick. This next writer is somebody who fell into that unfortunate category of you know, lots of acclaim early on, but died very young. This is Tom Reamy's Blind Voices. These used to be 10 a penny. This is a penguin. I don't particularly like that cover, but Tom Reamy, I've read some short stories. He had lots of acclaim from people like Harlan Ellison. He was tipped for the top, but sadly it never happened because he died quite young, and he's sort of like a sort of Bradbury-esque type feel, slightly odder, I would say. So I thought I'd pick that up because it's in really good nick. None of these have broken spines, and I felt really that was something that I should really sort of get into the library to have a peruse of later on. So that's Tom Reamy's Blind Voices. I am on quite a fantasy kick at the moment, and by that I mean sort of pre-Terry Brooks, pre the boom in fantasy that started in 1977 with all these artificially created trilogies and endless series that go on and on and on and bore everybody. You know, there are one or two good ones, but mostly they're formulaic and not much cop. But I saw this, which is Richard Purtell, The Mirror of Helen, and it's a door book, as you can see. It's printed slightly off because the yellow band creeps around the front and the white creeps around there, but otherwise it's in a really, really great nick. And that's a fantasy novel set around Helen of Troy. And I do like fantasy novels which have a historical basis because I think you get a true sense of the archaic. And of course, before we had realism in fiction, the sort of ground between magic and reality was sort of fairly thin. And I'm always interested in historical based fantasies, and I thought it was a nice looking little book. I know nothing at all about this author. I've not even looked him up in the Encyclopedia of Fantasy yet, so I must do that. So that one I got there, and it's lovely sort of, the text box is nice and yellow and it was nice and clean. These have had a bit of a clean as well, with the old sort of polish or sanitizer. So there you go. So that's a bit of fantasy. Another bit of fantasy. This is a book I read way back in the 80s, and it was the first of a trilogy. And I think I read the first two, and this is Damiano by R.A. McAvoy, Roberta McAvoy. And this is not the copy I had. This is a Bantam, but I think this is an American Bantam. I can see an American price at spine. I had a UK one which I read. I think I might have just read it in my lunch break at work. And there's a sequel called Raphael, after the Archangel Raphael. And the third in the trilogy is called Damiano's Lute. I never read that one. And they're set in Renaissance Italy, which is unusual. And this is Damiano, and he has a little dog who's a familiar that talks, which is a bit twee, but you know, it's happy memories again, and I'm looking forward to revisiting that because my interest in Italy is huge. As anybody who knows me will tell you, I'm fascinated by Italian literature, culture in the country, and so I'm kind of looking forward to that, to read that again. It'll be light, but it'll be fun. So that's Damiano's Loot. So those were kind of the one-offs I bought. So I thought then what I would do is show you the authors I focused on a little bit more in terms of my my sort of collecting focus that day. And there's a couple of authors I got several books by, and I'm going to start with, this was the most expensive book I bought in Hay that day, and this was £7, and this is Earth in Twilight by Doris Piserchia, which is very, very uncommon. There's one of these on sale on the internet in the UK at the moment. There's £20. Now, it's not in fantastic condition. It's got some sort of creases and what have you. It's got a fairly unbroken spine. It's got the yellow text block. It's seen a bit of action. But Doris Piserchia's books, some of them are very, very uncommon indeed. They were never published in the UK. Some of them theoretically were distributed over here by Door. Scott Bradfield did a piece about this recently. Hi, Scott. And if you've not, I've mentioned Scott's channel many times, and if you're a book lover, you really should check it out because it's great. And Scott's a really great writer as well. So that's something that's well worth looking out for. If you ever see it, pick it up, whether you're interested or not, because you will be able to sell it on for a reasonable amount. Let's say I paid a mere £7 for that, and that's very uncommon indeed. And apparently it's very, very strange. So I'm looking forward to that. She is a strange writer, but fascinating. I also picked up her book. This is a lot more common, and this is probably her second most sort of acclaimed book, and this is A Billion Days of Earth, and again, very quite strange. Sort of, in a way, she reminds me of Cordwainer Smith, Instrumentality of Mankind series. It's kind of a thing like that going on maybe with this one, so I'm looking forward to that. She's not somebody I think is ever going to blow me away, but I do find her fascinating. She does have something. So so I'm looking forward to that as well. So I've got a couple of Dorises, and my Doris collection is building up. She's still alive. She's 92. She hasn't written anything since the 80s. And I think she wrote about, I think with 2 zombie novels under another name, I think there's 11 books in total. And I've got about 4 or 5 of them now. So I'm sort of halfway there. And she is somebody I'm watching out for. So there we go. So I was pleased to get that. And I think that was £1, which is fantastic. It's in great nick. So again, going back to Richard Cowper, I decided to reappraise him as well. I used to have more or less all his books, apart from some of the later ones, and I got rid of them. And I don't know why, because, you know, he's a good English literary SF writer. I feel he's rather minor compared to people like Keith Roberts, Christopher Priest, M. John Harrison. But I want to try him again, and you can come across them fairly cheap. They'll say these are all £2.50 or less. I've got that one. I have read it, but I can't remember anything about it at all. But I did pick up a copy of Clone in the wonderful pan silver lozenge livery. I used to have a copy of this, but it was really in a state. There were lots of these in Hay. This was about the best copy there. Unbroken spine, not very faded, not much wear to it. Very sort of witty, I remember that as being. And I think it was shortlisted for a few awards. So I'm looking forward to reading that again, because that was one of the ones that I did really enjoy. And I only got rid of my other copy for space and because of the condition of it. I knew one day I'd pick up a decent one again. Then somebody else now who is not exactly forgotten, but really neglected. And I might have mentioned it before, and that's Bob Shaw. And Bob Shaw, that's Vertigo, again in the lovely pan lozenge livery, and The Two Timers. These are both books I've read, but didn't sort of own. And Vertigo, I think I might have even read now school library, I'm not sure. Maybe it's a bit later than that, but this one is quite a minor one, I felt. This is The Two Timers, which is an early one. It's a very Wyndham-esque doppelganger time travel love story, and it's a really great little book. And, you know, look at that, nice and slim, economical. And Bob Shaw was good because he was kind of a combination of a hard SF writer. You know, he really understood science, could talk about science, but he had the kind of literary sensibility of a new wave writer, good solid English prose. So he was sort of quite sort of interesting because, of course, in the 70s, a lot of writers took on board the sort of literary sort of lessons of the new wave and combined them with traditional SF sort of science-based storytelling. And that sort of took the wind out of the sails of SF in a bit in terms of new wave. But it did add something, and it sort of made people think that they should, you know, really aspire to write better, more literary prose. So that was quite an important thing. So, I'm really looking forward to reading that again. I have at times considered becoming a completist for the Pan Lawsons because I really love it. It was around from about 1975 till about 1983-84, and I think it's one of the best liveries, alongside Grafton's liveries in the 80s. I think it's sort of like the most classic A format SF livery we ever had in the UK, and I think they're beautiful. The thing is, though, I don't like all the authors and all the books they publish, so you know, it's one of those things. But if I come across the ones I don't have, and I have loads of them in really good condition at good prices, then I might sort of go for that, because I'm generally not a completist collector. I buy to read, I buy what I like, and I am occasionally now buying for nostalgia, because, you know, it's life is short and things move quickly, and you know, you think back to sort of great times you've had, and I've had great times reading and selling SF and talking to SF fans. So the books themselves have a kind of meaning, an emotive meaning beyond the sort of actual text and the reading. They have a iconographic feeling for me, which is really important. So there we go. So looking at those, I'm going to move these around a bit so I can accommodate a few more books here. And basically, the rest of the books I bought were from two authors, as I focused on certain authors on the day to try and you know, get people I've sort of neglected sort of up to speed, as it were. And the first of the two authors I really went for on that day was Jack Vance, who I've been sort of reading and buying increasingly in the last few years. I mean, I first read Vance back in the 80s, and you know, and funnily enough, this is an 80s livery Grafton of the Dragon Masters, one of his most acclaimed tales. And you know, this livery is absolutely beautiful, and you know, these are hard to come by in really good nick. Sadly, I didn't buy many at the time. I was a hardcore new waver, and I used to like a lot of cyberpunk stuff as well at the time. But you know, some of the more traditional people, they didn't pass me by, but I didn't consider them as core to what I was into. But if you become a serious science fiction reader and a bit of a historian and a critic, as I've become, you do start to look at what other critics have said and what people have contributed to the field. And Jack Vance, the writing is absolutely fantastic. I mean, my favourite books by him, of the ones I've read, are the Dying Earth novels, science fantasy novels, which are incredibly elegant, beautifully written, verbally inventive, and you know, they just shine out. And he was doing these from 1950 onwards. So Vance now is important to me. His books are becoming increasingly hard to get at all, and in good condition, very, very hard to get indeed. So I was really pleased with that. One of the publishers who supported Vance a lot in the UK was Coronet, which is a Hodgson Stoughton imprint. And this is Big Planet, with a cover by Jim Burns, who's a friend of mine on Facebook and a really great science fiction artist, personally my favourite science fiction artist. And Big Planet there is sort of a classic planetary romance. And again, I used to sell these, and you know, at the time I thought they'd always be around and never bothered to pick them up. And I've not actually read that one, so I'm looking forward to that, because that book's got a great reputation. As I say, all of these were $2.50 or less. And from the shops I mentioned, the most expensive of the shops is Addyman's, where sometimes you'll go to $4.50, $3.95 for this sort of thing. They do have a good stock, but do bear that in mind. If you go to cinema bookshop or booths, you're more likely to get £2.50, £2, which is more realistic in my view. So that's Jack Vance. And I also got this in the Planet of Adventure series. I'm not going to mention the title, which of course in America, that word there, which is to our eyes is misspelled, means something rather rude in the UK. Used to give us all a giggle all the time. There was a really, really nice B format Planet of Adventure omnibus from Grafton in the 80s. It only had one printing, and you never ever see it secondhand. This is a 70s Mayflower edition. I managed to get the Durder from this series from the Book Barn in Hallertrow in Somerset recently. So I need another two. And I say these have all got unbroken spines, and that's usually the problem. That's the thing with me. I hate books with broken spines. So, you know, I've got to try and get the other two with Unbroken Spine. So that's a tough call. Then a series by Vance that I've actually read, a trilogy, the Durdane trilogy. And this is the first one. This is the Anome. And I read these as Gollancz A formats in the late 80s when Gollancz issued them. And a good little series. And I managed to get volume 3 as well, the Asutra. And the second volume, The Brave Free Men. I've seen copies of this livery out there recently, but I haven't found one in the condition I want. The clever thing about these is that the artwork all fits together if you've got all three of them, and it's Jim Burns again, and really, really beautiful stuff. So you can't actually see the panorama here, but all three fit together. The second one has a chap on the cover with an unusual weapon, and they look fantastic. So when I get a decent copy of The Brave Free Men, I'll show you how the wraparound works. It's really, really clever. So great stuff there. So that's some more Jack Vance. I got a Jack Vance singleton here called The Houses of Ism, which is classic 70s Mayflower livery. As I've probably said before, Mayflower then became Panther. Sometimes it would have the word Triad on the cover. So Mayflower, Panther, Triad then became Granada by about 1980. And then in the mid-80s became Grafton before just disappearing into the sort of void of the HarperCollins empire. So a really nice cover that. It's a great one, a single one. There's the Mayflower logo there. So that's a bit more Jack Vance. And the final Jack Vance I got that day was The Book of Dreams, which is the 5th in the Demon Princess series. And this is a Grafton one. There are Coronet ones out there from Horror and Stoughton from the 70s and early 80s. I want the Grafton ones. I do have a real sort of Grafton thing, which I love. So I've got to get the other 4. And I say they're out there, but getting them with an Unbroken Spine tends to be a bit of an issue. So I got a bit of a Jack Vance haul there. So I'll just pop those to one side so I can show you a little bit more, as I said. I was looking at my Jack Vance collection last night and thinking, what else do I need to get? And I'm quite away from acquiring all the books I'd like. There's about another 12 I'd like. Now, if you collect Jack Vance in hardcover, well, you are in for spending a lot of money because he's dead now. And, you know, of course, some of them weren't issued as hardcovers at the time. They're paperback originals, but then wonderful limited edition firms like Underwood Miller did them in the 70s and 80s, and boy, they're really, really expensive. They're beautiful books usually, but they're really, really expensive. So there you go. So the paperbacks are gradually becoming more and more scarce because of that. So, you know, if you're collecting Vance now, it is a lot tougher than it would have been 10, 20 years ago. 30 years ago, it would have been a cakewalk. So yeah, but you know, his stuff is so lyrical and beautiful, and you know, he really is wonderful writer. Okay, so I'm going to show you now a pile of books by Poul Anderson, who, as I say, I've been on a real kick for recently, and I'm trying to get a lot of Poul's books together and then have a proper binge. I am reading Conan the Rebel by him at the moment, which is probably the only Conan book by another hand I'd consider reading. You know, I tend to stick to the Robert E. Howard stuff really, which is the original stuff. But I love Poul's work, so I'm reading that at the moment, and that's great fun. So I've got a pile of Anderson here. They are basically 2 or 3 series. 2 of them are quite complicated in terms of their internal chronology. So I'm not going to go into that now. I'll go into that another time when I do a proper Poul Anderson video. This is one that I remember stocking and selling, a nice sphere paperback there, of A Night of Ghosts and Shadows, which I think is a wonderful title. And of course, it's night as in good morning, good night, the sort of chivalric night. And there was a slightly later cover than that, which I remember selling more, but I do remember that one. That's by Melvin, who did some great SF covers back in the day, and really fantastic, great fun cover, that with the old spaceship that looks like it's got a face. So it's fantastic stuff. So that's beautiful. This one here, there's a couple here I actually bought from Fantastic Literature in Essex, which I've crept in without realising, and this was one of them. Simon at Fantastic Literature does, you know, he's very responsive. You can email him at 8 o'clock at night, and if he's around, he'll get back to you straight away. I did that last night. And this is After Doomsday, which is a post-apocalyptic novel. Lovely 70s one. Coloured text block. Look at that. Absolutely beautiful. This book was printed about 1975. It's 50p. You know, those were the days. You know, that's absolutely marvellous. Beautiful. So Fantastic Literature of Essex. You can find them in AB. They've got their own website, and they will often sort of do like a flash sale, or they'll send you a little chitty with the books with a little 10% off voucher, which is really nice. This was another one I got from him, The Long Way Home. And interestingly, on this one, there's a green text block. Now, I've had a feeling that some of these weren't printed like this, or certainly maybe the first printings weren't, and maybe they were. But it's weird. I don't remember any coloured text blocks from when I was a kid, except the ones from overseas. So I'm not quite sure what's going on there. Maybe they were for export, who knows? If anybody can tell me, please do, because I'd love to know. And I normally know this sort of stuff. So that's another one there. And you've got, you know, classic spaceship covers, people like Chris Foss. Another one I remember selling was Merkheim. And, you know, that is about as definitive an A format cover you will ever get on a science fiction novel. You know, it was one of those things in those days. I mean, even now you get it, but in those days, if you published a science fiction novel, you pretty much put a spaceship on it every time. I mean, even if a book like Tom Dish's 334, which is about a dystopian apartment block in a future New York, the copy I have is a spaceship on the cover, and it's completely irrelevant. But of course, you know, it was deemed commercial. So, you know, people probably went out thinking, well, this will be a good space opera, if they didn't read the back of it. And it was a dystopian thing. So more fool them. But they would have read a great book, because Tom was a great writer. So, and you know, I know writers used to get frustrated with this. I know Christopher Priest once wrote in a copy of The Space Machine, which I used to have, where he said something like, it was in parentheses, it was in quote marks, it said, we're going to, here at Futura, we're going to give our books a new, exciting modern look. I think it was Futura, or maybe Orbit, and, you know, blah, 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 blah. And then Chris wrote, and then why did you have the cover by effing Chris Foss? So, so, you know, so I know writers would get frustrated because often they felt they didn't represent their work and kept them in the ghetto. But, and I completely understand that, but I do have a sort of grudging love for these things, you know, so I really sort of like that. And speaking of great cover artists, this is The Day of Their Return, and that's Bruce Pennington, who did some great stuff. Very, very distinctive jacket style. This isn't one of his best, but it's obviously him. And funny enough, on the back of this book, there's actually a quote from him. It says, a book with plenty of pictorial content for at least a dozen good cover illustrations. Cover artist Bruce Pennington. So, you know, the publishers thought they'd sell this by saying, you know, this will conjure up images in your mind. So, you know, that's the thing. So that's weird. So that's almost like science fiction films sell themselves on great visuals and bad ideas. This is probably a book with good ideas selling itself on a visual. Not a bad visual, but a great visual. Speaking of great visuals, the next Poul Anderson book I'm going to show you wasn't on my list because I don't intend to become a completist. But there are quite a few I want to get in the major series. But I could not resist this book because of the cover. It really should have won the Queen's Award for Lurid. And this is I'm just going to look at the publisher first of all. Who's Colophon? Is that Berkeley? Let's have a look. It's Berkeley, and this is an American Berkeley edition of The Star Fox. Now, it's not often you get a green headless alien bringing you a cocktail on a tray, and the tray is sort of falling over. And, you know, you can't really win. I mean, that is what it's really all about. If you like it lurid, I mean, I think that is spectacular. So, again, as you see, absolutely beautiful covers, all these Poul books. Trouble Twisters, there we are, lovely spaceship there. And I would say that's a Foss. We'll have a quick look. It's a Foss and it's Granada. So that's sort of late 70s, early 80s. You can't really go wrong with that. Absolutely gorgeous. Here's a Corgi of Satan's World, which has a bit of a spine fade. And I say a lot of these fit into two of Poul's series, which I'll talk about again. I was particularly pleased with the last two I'm going to show you because they tend to be more uncommon and they tend to be quite expensive if you buy them online. If you buy them online in acceptable condition, they're usually £8 to £12, and by acceptable I mean fine to very fine. In other words, unbroken spines and not too much fading and not too much creasing or anything like that. And that's Orbit Unlimited. Really nice Foss cover there. Fantastic stuff. And finally, another Foss cover on Conquest, which is a short story collection. So that's the Hay-On-Wye book haul. of A format skiffy. As you know, on this channel, we never say sci-fi because that's for lightweights and amateurs and it's disrespectful, but you can say skiffy because it's affectionate and it's proper fan usage. So that's what I bought, quite a bit. I think it was 28 books in all. There's a few others on here, as I say, from other sources. That's the biggest amount of secondhand books I've bought in one go, probably for 10 to 15 years, maybe longer. I generally don't do really big buys like this anymore, but I went to Hay this time specifically to try and mop up a few paperbacks. I'm hoping to go again round about January, February, and I will be selling some stuff over there next time, and I may try and pick up a few more things. So despite the fact I made some disparaging comments about Hay and the way it's gone downhill, and it has gone downhill, it doesn't have so many bookshops as it used to have. A lot of closed down. It's becoming way too gentrified. And you know, people are moving in and the locals seem to be forced out, and the whole atmosphere is changing. It's not as special as it was anymore. It used to feel like a big open secret, and now it's sort of, you know, that the festival really has, you know, festivals are great fun for people. It's great for them to meet authors and things and to enjoy. And you know, when you work in my job, I'm in a privileged position. I sort of get to do that sort of stuff all the time, you know, so I can't complain. But it has unfortunately meant that the town is going towards more new books, remainders. A lot of the shops have shut down, so it is a shame. But you know, things move on. It is what it is. But that was my book haul from Hay-On-Wye. Hope you enjoyed it. We're almost at 200 subscribers now on the channel, and I think possibly by the time I post this will be over 200 subscribers, so I'll do an update then. Thanks to everybody who has subscribed. I hope you're enjoying the SF content. If you are, please subscribe because it's something I'm very passionate about. I've done lots of rock and roll recently. There will be more rock and roll because I love that as well. I want to keep doing SF. I will go into other areas of books if people subscribe or come back with feedback when I cover the other areas, but SF's always going to be a major thing on the channel. So this is Outlaw Bookseller signing out. Bye for now.